Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley. I would like to ask us, each and every one of you, that if you enjoyed these shows, please hit like, share, and subscribe after you view the show. Thank you very much.
Well, hello, world, and welcome to another episode of the Crisis Victory Show. I'm Dr. Hal Bradley, executive producer and host of the show, and I want to read a quick bio to all of you before I introduce Ted, who's my guest today. And it says here, Coach Ted O'Neill is a pioneer in human reinvention, known as the architect behind some of the most radical body and identity transformations in the world. He is the creator of the Miracle Map, Bio-Integration Training, and Paraphysical Training. He is co-founder of Lifted Academy, which has been called the Harvard of Personal Development, and awarded Best Personal Development Program in California for 2025. Founder of world-renowned Diablo Barbell, where he has developed more elite qualified powerlifters than any other living coach, as well as state, national, and world champions in a variety of other sports. With 30 years of elite coaching experience, Ted has led thousands to claim control of their chemistry, rewrite their identity, and rise into lives of power, purpose, and sovereignty. His work focuses advanced strength training, metabolic regulation, and identity reconstruction into an actionable system, helping individuals break free from dependency cycles and become more than human. At his core, Ted is a builder of leaders. His signature teaching, "Every problem has a solution," has redefined how people live. He believes true freedom begins with purpose alignment, getting command of your physical body, critical thinking with discernment and clarity of thought, and emotional sobriety. He believes that every choice is either a vote for the person you were or a person you're becoming. That's magnificent, Ted. And as I introduce Ted to my audience today, Ted O'Neill, hi. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Al, for having me on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you here. And I'd like to let my audience know that I interviewed your wife a few weeks ago, and she was giving me the story about her journey of recovery in a physical and ultimately psychological sense, and ultimately marrying you. That is amazing. And the other one, of course, was John Guerrero, and a friend and associate of yours who was struggling. He was struggling with a lot of psychological problems. He was overweight physically. And I had John on the show 2 weeks ago, and he gave a really good descriptive occurrence, if you will, of the rebuilding of his life. And I've known John for a few years, and just the positivity that I see in him today is just amazing. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. And so is your wife. I absolutely enjoyed her, Ted. So without further ado, everybody, this is Ted O'Neill, and you've just heard his bio that I've shared with you. And I'd like to have Ted take us through the stages and how he begins with people once he identifies specifically what they need done to transition their life and well-being. And Ted, if you can start explaining that to us, please.
Absolutely. So this has really been quite a journey. I'm going to give a little background on this first, Hal, because initially, my introduction into executive coaching and to high performance coaching was initially as a strength and conditioning coach. And I really saw the world through that lens where at the time, because this goes back 30 years for me, at the time, to me, kind of the height of transformation, I viewed that to be something that was in the physical. And, fast forward a few years, we had, I had become proficient in being able to take regular people into very high levels of performance. And I just started asking bigger questions, because it was something that I could see where someone could make a remarkable transformation. Maybe they were like average, just an average person, maybe even below average athletically, and we could turn them into like national champions in a variety of sports, mostly in the strength sports. Powerlifting was kind of my wheelhouse. At the time, I was also a competitive powerlifter. But there was this drop off to where I could view the world through the lens of the different levels of human experience, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And we could evolve someone to a high level in their physical state, but then they still might have struggles emotionally. They still might be totally disconnected spiritually. They still might lack focus or critical thinking or discernment. And so to me, that that was a problem in the way that I viewed things. The way my brain always has worked, it's going to the logical end conclusion of whatever is possible. So I saw the limitations of just training people within the physical. So I really began studying other fields. We had already had quite a bit of success in the physical. So I started looking at some other fields in science, like neuroscience, cellular biology, epigenetics,
Mhm.
quantum mechanics, places where bigger questions were being asked and answered on a regular basis, um, to see if we could take the blueprint that I'd already created and then
Mhm.
apply that for people in other areas of their life. And so this has really been where I am now with the work is the distillation of 30 years of this coaching experience, and then going into other fields for research and kind of pulling it back into the space of performance. And so I think your question was around the entry point now.
Yes. Yes, it was.
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting because I think the entry point as it sits today, I love that question because this is something that we've just recently put together in the most coherent way to date at Lifted Academy. I'll give you a little story on this. About 6 years ago, I became obsessed with this concept of purpose. And this was due to the fact that, we had a lot of trainings at that point that were kind of already beyond just the physical space. My wife at the time had the emotional sobriety curriculum that she had developed. I had a system called Paraphysical Training, which was a mental training and mindset protocol. And again, we would see people make these big leaps in those areas and then oftentimes kind of fall back to status quo. So I had in part solved some of the greater problem that I saw when I was just a coach in the physical. We had expanded the repertoire. We were making people better versions of themselves, but it wasn't always sustainable for everyone. And that really bothered me because if they could make progress, what was the mechanism that was bringing them backward? So
Wow, I like that.
yeah, because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was
That's
it was
interesting.
observable as to what was happening, specifically how or why wasn't super clear.
Well, I have a
So
question.
yeah,
If you don't mind me cutting in right here. When you do an intake and you have an initial potential person that you're going to go ahead and take through this process, what you're telling my audience and telling myself, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, is that you assess body, mind, and soul as one in fulfillment. So when you're assessing somebody, you're looking at their physical integrity, you're looking at their psychological ability, and you're looking at their spiritual awareness. Is that correct?
absolutely. It's and this is due to this observance that you can make big progress in one area and still be completely devoid of any cursory understanding in the other areas. And so you have this massive imbalance, which
That was my next question.
Yeah, it
Thank
just
you. You
causes
answered it.
massive friction in people's lives, because I think for a lot of people, when they're successful in one place, they can feel now that disparity in other places. So
Yes,
um,
of course.
this whole concept of purpose is, to me, I've come to understand this as like the initial starting point on a map. Like if you've ever been lost in an airport in a new city, like you go to a bus stop and they have one of those maps that says you are here, and you're like, thank God, because I had no idea where I am. And the little red dot on the map.
Yeah. Yes, I have.
Yeah. That to me is what this concept of purpose has now given us, because I started the study for 6 years. I would poll our people, and I kept the results, and over 90% of the people I asked what their life purpose was couldn't give me a really coherent answer. And those that did would
Interesting.
answer in a way that was really more like their passion, maybe their family, maybe their kids, something like this. But I had come to understand purpose as the best of what you have to serve others.
That is purpose.
Yeah,
That is purpose.
there you go. It's the greatest distillation
Absolutely.
of that definition. So that has now become the starting point, because if you ask someone this question of what is your purpose, why are you here, even high achievers, because the groups we're working with, these are people who are already seekers, leaders, high achievers in some way, shape, or form. They're coming to us looking for more.
Right. So
And
that's
yet
above
many-
that's above their goal objective. Purpose is different than goal objective. I
Yes,
like that.
absolutely. That's super important to define too, because we become
That's
so
new.
goal oriented, so objective oriented,
Right.
and we end up on this hamster wheel. So, I mean, I work with some named CEOs, people who are 100 millionaires, and because of this lack of purpose that they have, they feel the same
Yeah.
as everyone else who's facing a deficit. So this to me was like the thing we needed to solve. So
Amazing.
yeah, it's
I've never heard of this before, Ted. I've never
Oh,
heard
cool.
of this approach. It's absolutely phenomenal to me. As you know, my doctorate's in pastoral counseling. I've spent over 22 years as a doctor dealing with people that are going through critical crisis events in their life. And you're so right about the concept of body, mind, and soul, and to take that on as a one thing scenario. But you know, goal setting and purpose setting are two different stages, and you have identified the separation of that. And that's just, I've never heard of a program like this before, Ted. It's amazing.
Thank you. I don't know that one exists completely like this, and I have to
No.
say there was a limitation in our program. I already had at Lifted Academy a couple purpose modules, but it wasn't achieving the level that I wanted it to achieve at. For me, if we can't do something at a world-class level, I'd like to find who the person is who can. So through this obsession I had with purpose, about 3 years into this study, Dr. Andrea Vitz, my wife, she found a company called the Purpose Company, and we ended up collaborating with them. They are so niche focused on purpose that they've done an amazing job. They were the best that we found, truly world-class in what they do. They created this thing called a purpose assessment. And it's, a lot of people are familiar with like personality tests and this kind of stuff, or archetyping. It's not that. It functions in a similar way, but it's much more sophisticated. It's very low effort, kind of high return, because instantly we find a couple things. If you go through this assessment they created, which is as simple as answering questions for like 30 minutes, how they engineered this is beyond me, but it's so accurate, it's freaky. But
wow.
They've dimensionalized purpose into multiple different elements. So, for example, they've identified there's two elements of our purpose that everyone kind of comes into this world with. Most of us kind of get it beaten out of us along the way. And then there's two elements of purpose that are kind of acquired things over time from your experience, from skills that you build. So this purpose assessment really gave us that super coherent, you are here starting point on the map. And it's supercharged the other trainings that we already had in place, because I felt like the rest of the architecture was built to where we were really, really successful in turning people around, but there was still that 10% who weren't getting it. And that's what kept me up, because when people are really investing themselves in a process and they're still struggling, I felt, true to my mantra of every problem has a solution. We had to go out and find it.
I got a question, if I can cut in real quick.
Absolutely.
You're talking about dealing with world-class people that already have had a lot of experience in training and other programs. How do you confront ego?
Good
question, huh?
I love that question. So here's the thing. I don't take people anymore where their cup's too full.
Okay.
It's because it's you develop too much resistance.
Exactly.
So there's probably people out there who are successful with that. I'm not that guy. I'll tell you how I used to do it as a powerlifting coach, because I've developed more elite qualified powerlifters than any living coach, second historically to my mentor, Louis Simmons, who passed away last year. There's that old saying, you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make it drink.
Make him drink. Yep.
I was the one who figured out how to make him drink. I would bring the horse to water, I'd stuff its head underwater till it took air. Now it's drank water. So that's how I used to deal with ego, just through greater force.
Okay.
But what I found was there's a limitation in that methodology. One, to be able to do that, you're dealing with a very, very niche group of people who have already signed up for the ultra hardcore experience. So it's not a for everyone thing. But that was a way at that time to work with people who had signed up for that experience and were struggling with the ego conundrum. What I found over time was when someone is struggling in the space of ego, if they're not desirous of change, anything I introduce that's solution-based actually creates more harm than good.
Yes,
Because
I would agree with that.
Yeah, it creates resistance to the concept.
Right. Absolutely.
So now you have friction. What I can say is there is a way to bypass this when you have someone who has, maybe they still have a lot of ego, but they have a desire to change and they just don't know how to get over that block.
That's a good motivational point. Giving them the challenge of overcoming the block of ego.
Yeah. So what is ego, right? That's the, when you said ego, there's a couple things that came to my mind. And one of the I think it's considered one of the 10 most influential books in the world, the original book for Alcoholics Anonymous. They said selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of all of our trouble. And when I'm thinking of ego, if you go back thousands of years in advance of that, in the ancient Hermetic teachings,
yes,
there's a saying, man's two biggest problems are godlessness and mere opinion, which sounds a lot like selfishness and self-centeredness.
Sure does.
Dr. Vitz, my wife, in her book, The You You've Never Met, in her emotional sobriety curriculum, she says the only problem we ever truly have is ourselves. So all of these things point back to the negative ego, as you're mentioning. So the first cut I took at that was the assumption someone didn't have desire. But let's talk about if they have desire, but that's just their shortcoming, where they fall into these places of ego. And part of this goes back to this element of purpose alignment. A lot of time when someone is really stuck, what they're finding is there's friction in their life where they're attempting to live a life that's not in alignment with purpose. So they're constantly in internal conflict. So as we begin to resolve some of this stuff, we take this purpose assessment that we use from the Purpose Company. We distill it down to what I call the North Star framework, which is just, it's a training that I do that ultimately gets you to identify your life mission statement.
Okay.
So a lot of that can fall away when you start thinking outside the box. If my purpose is the best of what I have to help or serve others, and now I have a life mission statement that I created, now we can begin to let some of that go. But ultimately, what's going to get past the negative ego is one, being able to understand where our limiting self-beliefs come from. And this is something that has one foot firmly in the field of neuroscience. And so roughly the first 7 years of our life, as our brain is developing, every single bit of information we take in, we essentially record as fact. The mechanism for that is the human brain, as it's developing, is essentially like in delta and theta wave, which is the same brainwave state. If someone is susceptible to hypnosis, that's what a hypnotherapist would use, delta or theta wave, to get into your subconscious. So in those formative years, the best of our neuroscience currently tells us that 90% of our adult personality is developed in our first 7 years. And so that could be the formation of that ego. The remaining 10% happens through habituation, just when we repeat things over and over, maybe peak experiences or maybe other traumatic experiences. But here's the kicker. 95% of the time as adults, we're replaying those initial learnings that are hardwired in our subconscious mind. So every time information comes in, I'm comparing to what I believe to be true. And that's the ultimate formation of the ego, because that's used as a protection mechanism to bring us through life and to keep us alive. So this is also how two people. Yeah. So this is how two people can be in the exact same situation and have two wildly different interpretations of what's going on.
Absolutely.
It has to do with our personal reality. So part of this work that we do in the emotional sobriety curriculum is the identification of what your core beliefs are, the sponsoring thoughts and emotions behind your actions. And we literally go in and we reprogram those by creating a new chosen identity. It's principally based.
A chosen identity. Let's stop and focus on that for a second. I'm curious as heck to hear how that comes into play. How do you create and interpret to someone that you're getting ready to go into this deep type of work that you do to choose an identity?
Well, that's part of the advanced trainings, but to set the stage at this point, someone's already done a purpose identification. They've worked
Okay.
through some of these other parts.
So it's late stage.
Yeah, this
Okay.
you need some preparatory work. This would be like a physics class, right?
Yeah, exactly.
The prerequisites, for example, is one of them is this understanding that as long as we're in a body, this is one of my teachings. I called biointegration training. For years, I called it body recomposition training, but it's essentially the same thing. It's the recognition that as long as we're in a body, every single experience we have is essentially a function of chemistry. Like if we zoom out past our ego, when we zoom out past our emotional state, what we're really talking about is chemistry. Every thought, every movement, every sensation, including our emotions, are a chemistry. For example, our emotional state is a chemistry that we produce in the body that's matched with a thought. There's a connection between thought and chemistry, body and mind. That connection is based on a prior experience that was significant enough to leave an imprint that then created a system of beliefs. That's now how we identify as ourselves. So there's a pathway to this. And when you understand this pathway, like any other training, all trainings are repetition based. Like if you talk about training the physical body, really what we're doing is we're taking exercises and we're repeating them over and over. Training the mind works the exact same way. Training our metabolism, incidentally, works the exact same way. So this biointegration that I'm talking about, it's a means of teaching you how to speak the language of chemistry back to your body.
Well,
because
also,
go ahead.
I'm sorry. Also, when you're talking about repetition, there is a discipline that becomes attached to focusing and channeling down that particular repetition to where no other thoughts are integrating into what you're trying to accomplish in the moment of that specific field of the training that you're going into. Am I correct?
You are 100% correct. Here's the kicker on that is misunderstood. Until you're purpose driven, so you're not wasting energy, and until you have command over your chemistry, physical command, as I call it. So you've learned how to integrate this work to where your inputs, in large part the things we consume, not just through our mouth, but through our eyes, through our ears, through the relationships we hold, anything that changes how we feel inside of us is an input. When we move this idea of like consuming something because it tastes good or whatever into what is the biological instruction I'm giving my body, now we're learning how to manage our chemistry. So what I found was until we have control of this, we're really going to suffer. So in order to maintain an elevated human experience, which would include what you're talking about, that mental clarity, that ability to focus, you have to be free of what I call the cycle of addiction. It's cravings, compulsions, and mental obsessions. Now, this is hardwired into us from birth. This has specifically to do with what I'm mentioning about the formation of the brain, because those beliefs create a chemistry. Then we consume things that essentially match that same resonant energy signature of those beliefs, redoubling that to be truth in our body and in our mind. So when the body's chaotic, we can have moments of clarity. We can have moments of breakthrough. You have people who, can binge out and do all kinds of amazing things with productivity, but then they fall backward. So in order to sustain those higher levels, that area that you're talking about, where you have that mental acuity and that clarity to be able to focus on something like re-engineering yourself, you can't be thrown off by your body. You can't do it, because your body is the petri dish that you're creating those emotions from. So how on earth can
amazing?
It
is.
It's one of these things where it's so misunderstood because we don't think about our biology being what dictates our thinking and our emotional state. We just think I'm living my life. I wake up.
But are we not Trinitarian in creation? We are body, mind, and soul, and what we have to do is accomplish that level of recognition to where we have an equality in the balance of those three components of that which we are. Your training does that. Everything that you're explaining and everything you're talking about here, you're including body, mind, and soul in unity. Every conversation.
If you're going to reach the highest level of expression. So and this is something that, for me, over the years, I've had different takes on this. I approach this now completely from a place of non-judgment. Like I've arrived at a point in working with people that I can't look at someone who says, this is what I want my life to be, and I say, you're living your life wrong. I only, from that standpoint, once someone tells me I want help, and I say, this is what I have, and they say, I want what you have, now we're going to do it a certain way. But until then, it's like, I get it. People are free to choose whatever level of experience they want. But once they sign up for the radical shift, we're going to take them through this process of radical shift. It's surprisingly, I was going to say easy, but that might not be true. It's surprisingly simple when you have the right map. You know, we have this thing that we call the miracle map, because all a miracle is essentially is a misunderstood technology. Right. In 1905, what the Wright brothers did would have been a crazy miracle. 1906, they had already done it. Now it's a technology. How do you reverse engineer that?
I like that.
Yeah, right. Every problem has a solution. You can take things that are in art, like you're looks like my age. So we didn't grow up on the internet. If you had taken that back into the early 1970s, that would have, no one would have known what to do with it, because we hadn't got to a place where that was a thing. It would have been some crazy miracle of technology. So all these things, once it's achieved, and the precursor to all revolution like that is just a paradigm shift, which is included in all the elements of our work. For that reason, you can't get the miracle without the shift in perception.
I like that. That's real clear. Very easy to understand.
It's a foundational element. In fact, there's a guy, Thomas Kuhns. He wrote a book.
I've heard his name. I've probably read some of his work.
You probably read the book. I think it was The Mechanics of Scientific Revolution or something to that effect. But that was his contention. He was the one who popularized the word paradigm shift in Western culture, because he recognized that, through his work, all those things already existed in potential. We just weren't looking in the right place. So we're not necessarily creating in the new. We're looking in different places. And when you look at
that all sounds familiar to me, so I'm sure I've read that book somewhere in my, as you know, I'm an author. I've published 14 books. I get it, and the way you become a good author is by reading other people who have published books. It's a learning process, but and it's absolutely amazing. The depth, if you don't mind me coming in for a few minutes, I'd like to reflect on just exactly what you have shared here, the way that you approach your client base, the way that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears that you're taking on people that already have a lot of background experience in training cycles and working with people and understanding the discipline that is required to be able to transition into your specialized field of training that you bring, because you're not focusing just on bodybuilding here. You're focusing on the reconstruction and the rebuilding of life itself, the transformation of humankind. And that is absolutely, as you know, this is the Crisis Victory Show. I deal with people that survive serious crisis events. You bring them out of their crisis events. So this is an amazing conversation today, because I love it too, Ted. And I love that you not only use wisdom of life, but you also have academic structure in your background, because it requires both of those things to be able to balance, to be a leadership role, and for people to believe in you and what you're trying to convey to them. And you do it very well, very well.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate the kind words.
You too, sir. I appreciate this message today, and I think that people are really going to benefit from it. We're going to be winding down in the next few minutes. So before we close out the show, Ted, I know that there's probably some foundation points that you need to make to the audience. You're dealing with people, again, I want to reiterate, these aren't people that have, for the first time in their life, decided to walk into a gym and start bodybuilding. You're dealing with world-class level people. And now I know that John and your wife, were not world-class trainers, but they were people that were going through specific crisis events. And because of your approach from your earlier of your beginning of your 30 years of being what you're into, you were able to standardize the way that you would process and treat people that are going through a physiological crisis event, or in John's case, something as simple as weight management and getting a grip on his self-esteem issues and being able to have that building point to re-standardize his daily walk in life for his satisfactory self. And I really commend you on it. I learned a lot today in this conversation, Ted. I mean, it's remarkable. I've never heard of a program like yours, ever. And I've been around a lot of different programs. My job has been since I got my doctorate in 2004, and I work in pastoral counseling. I work in homeless camps. I work in trap houses. I have rape victims and overdose cases brought to my front door instead of hospitals because they have felony warrants out for their arrest and they don't want to get dope sick. I don't judge any of that with anybody. I'm there on a humanitarian scale, and I take the former life experiences of being an international smuggler for several years and later a high-level trafficker in the Pacific Northwest for the Sinaloa cartel, and then later 17 years working for the Department of Justice in multiple foreign countries. So what we do is we combine our life skill experiences and the wisdom taken from all of that, and then we add the academic realm to it, which takes another 10 or 12 years. It took me 13 years to get my doctorate. So, by the time you've got all of that together, you become pretty grounded in what your purpose is. You were talking about purpose. You and I, brother, we have a purpose. We have a specific mission, if you will, to make something better of that which has been damaged. And absolutely. Do you have a book out?
I have 2 books coming out this year.
Oh, good.
One is called Fed a Lie, and it has to do with this technology we call biointegration training, when I'm referencing back to how every experience we have in our body is chemically based. It really teaches the individual how to manage their chemistry step by step, because we found out it's really a precursor to these. It's the gateway to sustaining greater change. And then I have a second book coming out, Paraphysical Training, the Gnosis of Nap, which is the mindset training that we use. And so all these things, they kind of work sequentially. Like we mentioned, there's this purpose alignment we do. There's the biointegrations, we get people's chemistry right. There's the paraphysical training, which is the mindset. So all of those things give you that leverage to then tackle that emotional sobriety work we were talking about, because you have to have some momentum before you can re-engineer your identity. And when you've built those stages, then you tackle that. And really the end goal of all of this is to take someone with wherever they are in any struggle in their life, move them from a place of dependence. In other words, dependent on people, places, things, circumstances, things outside of me to determine how I feel inside of me, and really move them into this true alignment of independence. It's funny. I just referenced this the other day, but Stephen Covey, the guy who wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People, he had an amazing quote in his work. He said, "Dependent people can't be depended upon, because we're always thinking outside of us and we react." So our work gets people to this place of imminent independence, because we found when someone has built themselves up to where they no longer need something outside of them to influence or change how they feel inside of them, now they can move into collaboration. Now they can move into synergy. And when you're in that state, the conversations are different. You're in different rooms with different people. That's where you have the ability to leave a legacy, to make a bigger impact on the world, to really help people at all levels. And so that's the aim. We're in this mission to create leaders and get people to their highest level potential so they can share that with the rest of the world.
Absolutely amazing. And I see that we've posted your information, your contact information up here on our site, liftedacademy.com, the Ted O'Neill program. I really encourage all of my viewers today to be sure to take down and mark that information right there. I can't wait to see these books when they come out. I'm expecting an autographed copy, buddy.
You'll be one of the first to get one, my friend.
Yeah. And listen,
I want the work that you're doing too. That sounds so heavy duty. The stuff that you're involved in, that's amazing. That's such valuable and needed work in this world to be helping people who are really kind of under the thumb of the things that are. So,
the struggle. Thank you, brother. The struggles that they go through are so intense. And this is my 22nd year of working with rape victims and people that are strung out on drugs. And I mean, just horrifying events that people survive, but we can rebuild them and make them better. And the reward comes a year or two down the road when somebody knocks on your door in the night and they've got a baby in their arm and a brand new husband standing beside them, and they're no longer a prostitute. They're no longer out there in that world. And they come by to give that pastor a hug and say, "Pastor, thank you. We just wanted to come by and let you know we're doing okay." That's the reward, my friend.
That's an amazing reward.
Yeah. Well, listen, tell your wife that I said hello and I loved her on the show. And I get down in your backyard. I've already talked to Pete about it. We'll come by and see you guys and go have lunch.
Awesome.
Take care, my friend. Thank you for a wonderful interview.
You
too,
Appreciate
brother. God be with you.
Okay, folks. Well, that wraps up another episode today. And I'd like to take this moment to thank each and every one of you for taking your time to catch our show. Now, if you like these shows, I would ask that you would please hit like, share, and subscribe. It's so important to us that we get these messages out, and we understand that these are graphic, almost toxic interviews. But, this is the kind of impact that we feel is needed in order to make sure that people understand the significance of the problems that we are confronted within our own country and around the globe. So I'm going to say at this time that I love you all. God bless you all. Hasta luego, y vaya con Dios, and go Victors.